Are we live? Dad, are we live?
Yes, we are. All right. We are live here in the studio with my special guest tonight. We're here why are you here?
'Cause I was bored.
You were bored. So you know that quarantine has reached a new level when your teenage daughter is bored. Is this the first time in your life you've been bored?
No. I'm bored like every day.
You're bored every day.
I just watch Riverdale and go online shopping.
Watch Riverdale and go online shopping. Hey, Erica. Well, so for our thousands of viewers, tell everyone your name.
No. Can we be like Felicia? No. Hi,
You have to speak a little bit louder.
I'm Amelia.
You're Amelia. And Amelia, if you were talking to someone who was like, say, 10, and they wanted to know, what's the hardest part about being a teenager, what would you say? What's the hardest part about being a teenager? And is the quarantine hard on teenagers?
Yeah. Because
Yes,
I want
it
to go
is.
hang out like at the railroad. Oh,
You want to hang out at the railroad, but you can't? The railroad's closed for the quarantine?
yeah, that means that's easier to hang out there because you just go to the train tracks.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone. We're going to get started in a few minutes here. Go ahead and text in any questions you have, any prayer requests you have. I'm going to be talking about Hebrews chapter 10. If you have a Bible, you can kind of get that ready to look at. Welcome, Julia. Welcome, Carol. If you have any questions for our special guest, well, she may take questions.
Yeah, I'll take
It
some.
It depends on the question. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's see what time it is. Welcome, Jeff. Good to have you.
Just look. Did you click on? You can click on the viewers right there. Just click on them.
Right there. I only see it down here.
Oh, that's not how it's. Oh, guys, it's not.
Do you have tattoos?
I don't, but my dad said I can get one at 14. because, because.
So we have a comment that you should be careful hanging out at railroad tracks, which is advice
I'm
that
really
someone
smart.
else relayed to you.
I'm really smart about it because I don't go on the railroad tracks. I just go like to the side, so if a train comes, I won't die.
But you go far to the side?
Enough.
All right.
I don't go in like the tunnel or anything because if you go in the tunnel, you better just go to the walls if a train comes and hope that you can fit and not die.
But you're not going to do that.
No,
No.
I never go to the tunnel. It's so dangerous.
So someone wants to know, what will you get as your tattoo?
Probably a wave right there.
Okay. Maybe. We'll talk about it.
You already said I could get one. And I want to get a nose piercing.
So you have a roadmap for your style for the next couple of years.
A what?
You have a roadmap.
What's that?
That's like where you think about all the various things that you want to have happen over the next, 6 to 12 months. Like in business, we call it a roadmap.
I want to go to the mall. I want to hang out with my friends. I want to go to the mall again, and I want to go on a bunch of vacations and go to the beach.
Okay.
And get tan somehow because I'm really pale because I think I have low iron.
Okay. All right. Well, is there anything that you want to share with our viewers before we get started?
No, I thought they were just asking me questions.
Asking questions. All right. Well, If you have any other questions for Amelia, she will be in the background here.
What?
Thanks for being part of the pre-show here.
I didn't know.
So I'm going to get started. Hey, Deb, welcome. Welcome, Chrissy.
Hey, Mom.
Hi, Mom.
Is she on?
Yep. Welcome, Ian. All right. All right. Well, you can go off camera now. All right. Well, welcome, everyone. What I want to do is I want to start by just kind of giving you a little reflection that I have on the scriptures and on where we find ourselves here in our situation this evening. I am part of a club with not very many Christians that's part of it in my life, and have folks that many of which I don't know super well, more acquaintances with. We get together and we fly drones for fun. And the other day, after President Trump came out and gave his speech about churches being classified as essential, which, by the way, was already the case in Pennsylvania. Churches have always been classified as essential in Pennsylvania, although I understand that that's not the case in other states. But anyway, an acquaintance that I have went on social media, and he was doing something that's very rare on social media, where he said, look, I don't want to argue, I don't want to debate, I am genuinely interested in understanding from someone who's religious, why is the church essential? That was his question. He said, I have no concept of why anyone would ever think that church or religion should ever be considered essential. And so, I don't respond to people on social media. It's kind of a policy I have. I don't generally post about anything of substance unless I'm doing one of these videos or if I'm doing something in a more written format. But his question really stuck with me, and I began to think that through. And as our elders met and we were talking about gathering, I was asking this question, is the church essential? Is it essential to the well-being of our people, of our city? How would we answer that? And, I'll tell you how I do answer that. As I was thinking through where we find ourselves right now, in the last month, I've been made aware of 2 suicides that have happened, people kind of in my network. I've heard from a number of folks experiencing all kinds of forms of depression, of anxiety, of all kinds of mental stress. I've heard of sin. So I've heard of people tell me that, this is a time where sins that they thought had been mastered have kind of come back with a vengeance. I've heard quite a bit of loneliness. The phrase that everyone hates right now is the phrase social distance. We hear that all the time. I will tell you that what I've discerned and what I've heard in increasing numbers is what I would call spiritual distance, right? People are feeling disconnected from the Lord. People are feeling isolated. People are feeling lonely. And then I think the one that I've been really chewing on over the last couple days is that people are feeling complacent, right? They're feeling complacent, saying things like, what's the point of even trying to connect with folks if I can't do so in person? I'm not even going to try using other means. And, it broke my heart that the acquaintance I have who was actually asking this question, is the church essential? He went on to share 2 days later that actually one of his family members took their own lives. And I say that because, as I think through this question of reopening, as we think this through, as we ponder this, as I ponder all of the barrage of information concerning public health that's coming our way, I've been thinking about it with a word that I'm going to use tonight, which is the word balance. Right? On one hand, there is a disease that I don't pretend to understand super well. I am not a doctor. I'm not a physician. I don't study these kinds of things, epidemiology. On the other hand, I do understand some of the spiritual, emotional realities that folks are experiencing and are taking an increasing toll on their lives. And so, as I was thinking through how to answer this person about is the church essential and why would it be essential, the answer that did come to me is this: that the church, the best way to explain it to you, right, for someone who's as far away from the Lord as you could imagine, the best way to explain it to you is to say that the church, for those who are deeply involved in it, the church becomes like family. And to be separated from your family for 11 weeks takes a profound toll on your lives. And so as we think this through, as the session has been thinking this through, my opinion to the session and my opinion to you is that the church is essential in all kinds of ways. And if it's not, then there really is no point in doing what we're doing. There's no point in seeking to love and serve our city, to preach the gospel, to plant churches, right? If it's not essential, then what in the world are we doing? So the church is essential, and I'm going to try to present a little bit to you our plan, kind of in reflection on that. But if you would, look with me in the scriptures, Hebrews chapter 10. So in Hebrews chapter 10, the author is actually speaking to a bunch of Christians who have stopped meeting. The understanding is that they've stopped meeting because it's become unsafe to do so. The safety hazard in the book of Hebrews is very likely that the authorities, those folks who are in power, in control, are singling out and penalizing, harming Christians who are meeting together. And so if you look in verse 23 of chapter 10, the author says this. He says, "Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near." And I love this passage because the author is addressing this question, why is it that we should meet together? Like, what's the purpose that we meet together? And I've heard from a number of you, and I've experienced myself that, all of these things that I've discussed, right? That we feel lonely, we feel isolated, we feel disconnected. We feel, we long to have some of the celebration kind of stuff that we had. We're planning what we are calling a fiesta for our leaders as we look to reopen, and we're really excited about that. But why is it, though, that meeting is essential in the scriptures? And the answer that the author gives us is because there are people that God has placed in your life who are in need of your encouragement, right? Let us not stop meeting together, he says, but instead let us encourage one another. Let us stir up one another to love and good deeds. Let us call each other to walk with the Lord. And that, friends, is really the heart that I have for you and that I have for our church in this season. The session is meeting quite a bit right now as we're trying to grapple with all of the various bits of information that we're getting in almost on a daily basis. And we're thinking that through, and I'm going to be sharing our plans with you tonight. But I'll tell you that, the spiritual heart that I have behind this is that there is a very real spiritual and emotional toll that is being inflicted upon your brothers and sisters right now. And I want to call you to take certain steps that you would be comfortable with. I'm not asking folks to, if you're at risk or anything, I want to be very clear. I'm not going to ask you to do anything you're uncomfortable with. But I want to ask you to find ways to encourage those people that God has put you into community with, right? So let me begin to share with you our plan. You can find this. I'm going to post the link here in the comments at Ironworks Church. Oops, if I can type. .org/gather. So as I share with you the plans of the session, there's 3 words that as a session we've been using to discuss our approach to reopening. There's 3 words that kind of summarize, I think, some of the main points that we've been using. And those words are humility, patience, and balance, right? Humility, patience, and balance. So first of all, humility. As your elders gather together, we are keenly aware of the fact that we are not experts in epidemiology, that we don't know more than the experts that are leading us and guiding us. And I want you to understand that we are not sitting around a table and dismissing expert opinion, right? We are attempting to be as faithful as we can to what the national government is recommending and then what the state government is recommending. We have a particular privilege at Ironworks in that we have a relationship with one of our Chester County commissioners, Marian Moskowitz, who actually has agreed to be a guest on the Ironworks Late Night Show next week. So you can tune in. If you have questions for her, she has done a fantastic job advocating. I believe that it was her advocacy that's resulted in the change of status coming a bit early for Chester County that's happening now on June the 5th. So we are excited for that. But as the sessions gather together, this idea of humility has been a guiding value for us. That's the first thing. The second thing is patience, right? So as we're gathering together, as we're taking in all of the data, it's not an exaggeration to say that details and recommendations are changing on a daily basis. So for example, the CDC, at the national level, posted a document of guidance for churches, and that document had significant and substantive corrections from the version on Saturday to the version I looked at yesterday, right? We looked at it on Saturday, we looked at it yesterday, and there were substantial differences in that document from the national level. So that's changing on a very regular basis. Even in our own state, the governor had given one set of criteria for going to yellow, and then last Friday, that changed significantly from what he previously said. So, as we receive information, as we keep our kind of finger on the pulse of what's happening in the church, in our country, we're going to adapt and change based on that information. So for example, we put out a poll to 60,000 people on a Facebook group for folks involved in certain kinds of church leadership. And we're asking these folks, what are you seeing as you gather together? Because Pennsylvania is among the later states in beginning to reopen. And so there are churches that have been gathering now for some 2, 3, 4 weeks, and we're reaching out to them and saying, what are you seeing? What's the consequence of doing these kinds of practices? What's going on? And, their feedback has been helpful, but we think will especially be helpful over the next 4 weeks. The last word that's informing our approach is this word balance. And so, I want to just tell you very personally, I was asked the other day, someone said to me, they said, Darin, are you afraid of, making a decision that's going to offend, a or certain groups of people because they disagree with your decision? And, it's interesting, what I was thinking in response to that is, no, I'm not really afraid of that. I mean, I don't like to be criticized. I don't like to disagree with people. I don't have any pleasure, enjoy that at all. But when it comes to this time of leadership, that is not at all what I'm thinking of, right? I think of primarily two things as I participate on the session and having these discussions, and I'll give you some examples, right? One thing I think about is burying you. I do. I think about that. I think, if we make a wrong decision, I'm going to be conducting funerals that I wasn't planning to. That's what I think. I'm going to be conducting funerals of folks in our church, right? That I have no plans. I have no plans right now for that. But if we make a reckless decision, that may be the reality. I may be burying you. That's what comes to mind. That's the fear that informs one side of this word balance. There's another side, though, and that is that we may see folks walk away, not from the church, but from the Lord. Right? I'll tell you that the level of spiritual complacency that I've seen, that I've even experienced in some ways personally, is a profound and a very real danger that I do not take lightly. that in some ways I actually fear more than the first issue, right? So, when folks ask me, are you afraid of kind of angering people and going and whatever, and by the way, there's, no matter what we do, I realize that there's going to be folks on all kinds of sides that disagree, and I respect that. But I'll tell you that what we're trying to do is we're balancing a responsibility to take measures to seek public health, right? Acting in humility, seeking to follow reasonable guidance that's being given to us by those in authority. But we're also mandated by God to take seriously the spiritual care of you, right? To take seriously the kinds of care that God has asked us to show to you. So those are the two sort of things that kind of jump around in my head, and those are the things that the session has been grappling with. If you've started looking at our webpage there, you'll notice that what we're doing is we're beginning to announce our plans for what Pennsylvania is calling the yellow phase. So that phase is scheduled to go into effect on June the 5th. And from the church's perspective, in keeping with the guidance from our government, we are treating the yellow phase in one or in two words, really, and that is small group. Right? What we want to recommend, what we're encouraging group leaders and members of the church to is, the yellow phase is the return of the small group. And everything is all about the small group. So the guidance from our government is that you should gather in no more than 25 people, right? And our small groups are all generally significantly under that. And what I'm encouraging you to do, in accordance with what you feel comfortable with, right? Some of you are at risk. If you have multiple risk factors, you might not be comfortable with this, and I completely respect that. But if you don't have those risk factors, I'm encouraging, asking, exhorting you to consider gathering with your small group, right? Whether that's a home group or whether it's men's, women's groups, other groups. Take steps to be with folks physically. From a practical standpoint, I think it's helpful if groups can meet outside. That's another part of this guidance that we've received, right? And they can take steps and precautions to do so in a way that's not going to result in some kind of an outbreak. But what I'm saying pastorally is, if you've been at home for 11 weeks and you don't have a tremendous amount of risk, my advice to you, my encouragement to you, my exhortation to you is find those people in your small group, and if you're not part of one, find one to join and go encourage them. Go show up, not even primarily for your own benefit, though I think it'll be profoundly refreshing to you, but go show up for the benefit of other people, as this passage is exhorting us to. So that's the first thing, right? That the yellow, we think, is all about the small group. We're recommending that small groups find ways to meet. We think outdoors is particularly helpful. We also think that it might be helpful to have kind of some live stream watch parties. So we will still be live streaming on Sunday morning during the yellow phase. So, now that we're being told that we can gather in groups of 25, we think that, live stream watch parties might be helpful to some of you. And those would be a good chance to come and to, worship together in a home, have a meal together, and enjoy kind of connecting with others face to face again. The second piece of it, though, is that we're also recognizing that not everyone is going to feel comfortable, right? There are some of you who are at risk, more so than others. And so our guidance is that we want all groups, and we're going to continue the live stream, of course, to find ways to connect with members of the group that are at risk, right? To still pray with them over the phone or over Zoom or things like that, right? That don't leave anyone behind, right? This is not a time to, kind of form into groups that are leaving others behind, but this is a time to actually seek out those who, if someone's at risk and is not comfortable with showing up to, a home group meeting or something like that, then they're probably going to have more loneliness because they're going to be in this sort of phase for longer than you are. So take some time to reach out to them, find ways to connect with them that they would feel comfortable with. Additionally, we're planning currently for June 2 sort of Wednesday evening gatherings in the courtyard, which will be more corporate in nature, right? So we're going to be gathering as a church. We don't expect this to be, tons of people. And what I'll tell you is that, in keeping with this idea of balance, that, we're taking steps that that are being recommended to us by the governing authorities, but we're doing so in a way that, in keeping with the Ironworks spirit, is not legalistic, right? So if you show up and you're not wearing a mask, we're not going to criticize you. We're not going to have kind of like social distancing police or anything like that, but we are going to ask that you take the counsel from our government seriously, and that, if you think this is all overblown, et cetera, that's fine. But at our events, we ask that, we want to honor those authorities, and so we do want to try to do the things that are being asked of us. However, the spirit in which we do them, we don't want to be legalistic. Someone described going to the supermarket as a depressing and oppressive experience. And so our design for these Wednesday evening gatherings, if you choose to come, is that, we are asking folks to make a good faith effort to honor this counsel being given to us by the government, but we also want these gatherings to not feel oppressive. We want them to be full of life and joy and freedom. So that's kind of the balance that we're seeking to strike there. And having said that, I'll tell you that, there is risk if you attend either a home group or this Wednesday evening gathering. How much risk? I'm not really the person to say. I don't have the level of precision, and the information that we have read is that no one really does at this point. But there is some risk. You might get sick. You might cause someone else to get sick. However, if you isolate for an infinite amount of time, you are guaranteed to suffer spiritual harm as well. So, it's a balance when you choose and what events you choose to go at. Folks are going to approach that differently, and I want you to know, as your elders, we respect that. But our exhortation is that take the steps that you are comfortable with to reach out and to encourage others. It is our plan that we will resume Sunday morning worship when our county goes to the green. If you haven't heard, Marian Moskowitz, who's one of our county commissioners, it is her goal that would happen by the end of June. So we are working and taking steps to prepare our building, and to put in the kinds of precautions that are being asked of us to have a Sunday morning service beginning in the green, which we expect and are forecasting to be for July. So we're excited by that. And in addition to these other gatherings, there's another gathering you could consider attending that I would be especially thankful for, and that is that we are in need of some rock star work days. So we've had a lot of construction kinds of stuff going on at the church related to the floor, related to some other projects. So we're going to be scheduling a work day, and we think that could just be a fantastic time of folks coming out and really being part of getting the facility ready again to host worship in the month of July. So we're excited by that. I will tell you that as far as the kinds of steps that we'll take in July, the session has said that we're going to be monitoring very closely what's happening in our county and then what's happening around the country almost on a weekly basis, so that as we approach July, that we can make the most informed decisions about what kinds of steps that we'll take for those worship services. So that's where we are. I do want to commend the softball team on being undefeated this season. That's quite the accomplishment. Thank you, Matt. So is there any questions that you have? Feel free to put them in the comments. Be happy to take any questions that you have. All right. Yeah, and I would just say too, I want to just reiterate while I have, those of you who are watching that, some of you have taken me up on my email to visit you pastorally, and I really enjoy that. And if you're not comfortable with the visit, if you would like a phone call, I just want you to know that I want to I want to connect with you. I want to hear what you're experiencing. I want to pray for you. I want to listen. I've had a couple of you take me up on that, and those have all been really deeply enjoyable for me. So if you'd like that, feel free to send me an email or a text, or shoot me a message on Facebook. I would love to connect with you. Is the floor in Franklin Hall still roped up? Yes, unfortunately it is. We've been working very diligently on the floor, and I hope to have some more updates for you about that next week. Basically what it comes down to is that as we ripped the floor off, as I like to call it, the naked floor was far worse than anyone imagined. And so we've had now, I think, 4 or 5 vendors working on this, and discovering different issues. So we've made some progress on it today. Laura will have an update for you, hopefully next week. But we're very confident that we will have the floor looking amazing for when we begin to have services, what we're hoping to be in the month of July. Good. Other questions? All right. I would be curious too, if you have an opinion on this question, is church essential? I'd love to hear from you on that. I've shared with you some of my thoughts, shared with you what we've experienced, but would love to hear from you. Is the church essential? What do you miss the most about church? I miss seeing your faces. I honestly miss worship, singing. I still get to preach, which is a privilege and a blessing. I miss communion. I miss the kids. I miss seeing the kids run around. That's enjoyable for me. So I'm looking forward to whatever the Lord has in store for us in the days to come. Any other questions? I want to give you guys just another minute to ask anything here. And we appreciate your prayers, Katie. Thank you. Miss seeing you guys. Miss seeing your little girls. Looking forward to being back with you. All right. Thank you, Matt. All right. Well, allow me to pray. Father God, Lord, we praise you. We thank you that you have given Ironworks Church so much, that we are rich in Christ. Lord, I pray that we would reemerge from this quarantine in a way that is responsible, in a way that is humble and patient and balanced. Lord, I pray that you would give the session the right wisdom to make every decision. I pray for every member of our church that you would be with them, that you would encourage them, that you would comfort them, that you would give them grace to not fall into complacency or spiritual distance, but they would find you, that they would find others to encourage, they would connect with one another at a deep and a significant level. Lord, I pray that you would keep us from an outbreak. Pray that you would keep those who are at risk safe, especially. Lord, I pray that you would give us much grace. I pray that we would be able to encourage our neighbors, many of whom who are suffering in all kinds of ways. Lord, I pray that the gospel would go forth in power. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, great to be with you all tonight. God bless you.